So you got your hands on a new DSLR camera, takes amazing, stunning photos, but you want to step your videography up to the next level. Where can you start? I mean, DSLR cameras can be very overwhelming and you want to be able to do a good job, so I'm going to show you exactly what you need to know in order to perfect videography on a DSLR camera. Step 1 is setting up your camera. You might think that it's fine just to start shooting as is out of the box, but there's a couple key things you need to do to set it up to get the best out of what you're filming. The camera settings right out of the box may not be exactly what you're looking for your project. So we're going to want to switch it to manual mode so you can control 4 things: the white balance, the aperture, the ISO, and the frame rate. Step 2 is selecting the right frame rate and resolution for your shot. Choosing the right frame rate and resolution is crucial for your project. You might think the highest resolution is the best, but it may not be right for what you need to do. High resolution with the wrong frame rate can result in less than ideal footage, especially for fast-moving scenes, so select 24 frames per second for normal interacting scenes, or 60 frames per second if you want to get smooth, slow motion shots. Step 3 is optimizing the focus in your settings. Getting sharp focus is key to professional-looking videos. You might think autofocus is good enough, but it's not always reliable in every single situation. Autofocus can hunt, causing unwanted shifts in focus during a shot. Switch to manual focus for more control, especially during crucial scenes when you need to film from one focus point to another. You want to make sure that your focus is tack sharp. Number 4 is adjusting your picture style. You might think these are just good for photos, but they're equally important for video as well. But default settings might oversaturate or oversharpen your footage, limiting your flexibility in post-production. So opt in for a neutral or flat profile to give you more options when you're color grading the footage later. Step 5 is the audio setup. Great visuals are important, but audio is half the story. You might think the built-in microphone in your camera is sufficient, but it picks up too much ambient noise. Poor audio quality can ruin an otherwise amazing video. People can always forgive bad video, but they usually can never forgive bad audio. So use an external microphone for a more clear, professional sound, like this. Here's an example of what the built-in microphone sounds like on the camera. This is what it sounds like using a shotgun microphone on top of the camera. And here's an example of using a lapel mic for your videos. Still using a lapel mic. Still using it. Step 6 is adjusting the white balance. White balance is key to getting accurate colors in your video. You might think the auto white balance setting is good enough, but it can sometimes misjudge the lighting conditions. Incorrect white balance can lead to unnatural colors in your footage. So manually set the white balance according to your environment. Use 56,000 Kelvin for daylight or 32,000 Kelvin for tungsten or indoor white light. Step number 7 is mastering the ISO settings. ISO controls your camera's sensitivity to light. You might think that cranking up the ISO in low light is better for your footage, but it can be worse because it starts to add a ton of unnatural, unwanted noise to your footage. Too much noise can degrade the quality of your video and people will notice it and not like it. Keep the ISO as low as possible in the lighting conditions you have. If you need more light, consider opening up your aperture or adding more light to your scene. Step number 8 is optimizing your shutter speed. Shutter speed affects the motion blur in your video. You might think that cranking it up makes your video more sharp and more clear, but oftentimes it just makes it way too jittery. Too fast of a shutter speed can make your footage appear unnatural, and that's not what we want. So for smooth cinematic motion, set your shutter speed to double your frame rate. So if your frame rate is at 24 frames per second, set your shutter speed to 50 frames per second. If your frame rate is at 60 frames per second, set your shutter speed to 120 frames per second. That will give you the most natural looking motion blur in your scenes. Step number 9 is controlling the aperture of your footage. Aperture controls the depth of field or how much of your shot is actually in focus. You might think opening your aperture super wide is good for every scene, but it could lead to you not having something very important in focus in the shot, aka only small parts of your scene being in focus rather than what you really need to be in focus. So adjust your aperture depending on what the scene requires. A wider aperture like f2.8 will have a very shallow depth of field, meaning a very small amount of your footage is going to be in focus. But an aperture setting such as f8 will put mostly the entire scenery in focus. Now you have the ability to take your videography skills to the next level using a DSLR camera. Remember, practice makes perfect, so keep on doing it every single day. You'll get better, people will notice, and you'll have a great time doing it. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it if you want, and leave a comment telling me any other kinds of tutorials that you would like to see on this channel. Have a great day.